Yo, Dog Pack is Kenny Mack. Hall of Fame weekend's going to be a dog pound party. So book your vacay, grab your cooler and your Browns gear for this 4-day Joe Thomas party. And we can watch our four-stringers kick somebody else's four-stringers' butts. Let's go, Brownies, and let's kick this off. Woo, 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 woo.
Welcome to the Dawgs Podcast with your hosts, Blake Reneker, Justin Charles, John Nye, and Josh All.
What's up, Browns fans? Welcome back to another episode of the Dawgs Podcast, brought to you by DraftKings Sportsbooks. Please bet responsibly. I had to give up betting because I just kept losing. I'll maybe get back into it, but I ran out of free bets, and I was like, I can't do it anymore. If you want to get your intro on the show, head to thedogspodcast.com, tap leave voicemail in the drop-down menu. Today, we have a very special guest who's going to be joining us right after this open. We have Quincy Carrier joining us. If you're watching our show, then I bet you've watched his show at some point, so we're super excited to have him here. Before we get to Quincy, though, I want to remind you guys to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Make sure you tap the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. We've had a bunch of people comment on our videos and message us saying, hey, where have you been? This is the first video we've seen in a couple weeks. Yeah. We've been posting at least 1 to 3 to 4 videos every week for 3 years. So there's something going on where our videos aren't really popping up anymore for some people. So if you're listening to this and you're like, where have these guys been? Make sure you have the notification bell hit so you get notified when we post a new video. You can also find us on Apple, Spotify, and Google if you prefer to just listen to the show. And lastly, if you're looking for more Dawgs content, head to jointhedawgs.com, become an official Dog Pack member on our Patreon page. You get an extra episode every week. You get access to the private Discord. There's Dog Pack members of the month. We give out free merch all the time. We've met a couple of these people. I've gone to Browns games with one of them. It's just a good time for everybody. You get access to us more often. You get access to that Discord, and there's Browns fans in there literally 24/7. So if you need something to get you through a slow off-season, jointhedawgs.com, become an official Dog Pack member. So as I mentioned in the open, we're joined by a very special guest today. If you're watching our show, then you probably needs no introduction, but I'm going to give it to him anyways. We're super pumped to have Quincy Carrier here with us. Big Browns and just overall Cleveland content creator on YouTube. I know we've all been watching since before we even had a show. So this is almost kind of like when your fans become your idols kind of thing. We're getting to meet somebody we've been watching for a long time. You can find Quincy on YouTube. He's also on Twitter at Quincy. So if you're not following him on Twitter and you haven't subscribed to him on YouTube yet, make sure you do that. Thanks for being here with us today, man.
No problem. Make me feel a little old. I think I'm uploading every day. I'm not really counting the days, but I guess I have been doing this for a little while, right?
Yeah, man. It's awesome to have you here. We've been watching your content. So we've had people in our comments saying, man, you guys should talk to Quincy sometime. You should talk to Quincy. And I was just kind of waiting for that right time. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to ask him, see if he wants to do it. So awesome for being here. We'll just go ahead and dive right in. Actually, kind of a lot of Brown stuff to talk about. So just released, I think it was today or yesterday, the Browns, Andrew Berry coming out and saying that they're going to move on from John Johnson III. Are you surprised by that at all? I know there was a lot. Do you think his poor play was scheme related? Were we playing him out of position? I know a lot of people were talking, they didn't think he was putting in the effort. What did you think the issue was, why it didn't work out here?
I think it was a combination of things. I really wouldn't be surprised to see him pop up probably in LA and play well. I think the issue with him was he was signed to take a step in his career, right? To become a more true free safety. And that never really materialized for him in this system to where it wasn't what he did well, right? They didn't sign John Johnson to do what John Johnson did previously. They signed John Johnson as a projection of what they felt like he could do in the future. And he just wasn't as capable as they hoped he would be. And now they're in a position where, if they're letting go of him, that tells me that they feel really good about Grant Delpit in his future with this team. So that means that they're going to be able to have him replace him for that. So it's just one of those things where it just didn't work out. I think John Johnson is a good player. It just didn't work out here. You're only going to be as good as the role that you can fulfill. And when you're in a role that you can't fulfill, then you see stuff happen to where you're not as motivated to play. You're not giving as much effort on every play. And I think some of that showed up with John, where he didn't really believe in what he was being asked to do. He didn't think that that was the best way for him to be used. He wasn't making plays. He wasn't feeling good. He wasn't like, the confidence wasn't there anymore. And when the confidence isn't there, the effort's not going to be the same. And then you just don't get the same level of play. So it was probably best for both sides. If they didn't want John Johnson to go back to that role that's going to be similar to what Grant Delpit played, it makes sense for them to move on and for him to move on. So this makes sense. They're going to save money on the cap. Maybe some of that money gets put towards Jessie Bates. Maybe some of that money gets put towards somebody like Jordan Poyer. But the Browns also don't want two strong safeties right now. They want a free safety. So it's just kind of the way that things go. And I think it's working out for all sides here that it's coming out like this.
I think you kind of saw that from a lot of the guys on the Browns defense. It seemed, especially as we got into the season, it just seemed like they didn't really believe in what they were being asked to do. I think you kind of saw that from more than not just John Johnson.
Yeah, and then when you're just not playing good, even if you did believe what you were going to be, what you were asked to do, you stop believing. Like, when you're giving up 300 yards on the ground to the Bills, like, what am I supposed to believe in what I'm being asked to do? Right. Jake Burns talks about this a lot, and I tend to agree with him. And he says, we want to talk about like momentum a lot, right? And we talk about momentum as it comes out of thin air. No, momentum is just energy. And where does energy come from? Energy comes from execution. So when you're executing well, you have all the energy in the world, right? Like if you guys, I don't know if you guys play a lot of pickup basketball, but it's kind of like that with pickup basketball, right? Where it's like, if you stink and you're not making your shots, all of a sudden running down the court playing defense, that seems like a big endeavor, right? Like that seems like a tiring thing to do. But then let's say if you're making your shots and let's say you set a screen and the guy follows the screen and he takes the cut there and then everything's executing well and you feel like you're a part of success and everybody, all of a sudden it's a breeze getting up and down the court. It's a breeze hustling and all that, right? Energy comes from execution. You'll see sloppy, unmotivated play from any football team that doesn't execute well. And when you are one of the worst defenses in the NFL, you're just not going to get great effort because nobody has energy because absolutely nobody is executing well. And honestly, I would be concerned if somebody had a bunch of energy and they weren't executing well because what do you think you're doing when you have this much energy? Right? Like, it's like with people made fun of Perrion because he did like the scream and yell when they gave up 15 yards, but he made a tackle downfield. It's like, okay. Like that's a part of like you can't just make up energy, right? You have to play well in order to manifest that. And they didn't play well. Nobody's going to believe what they're being asked to do. Like this has happened with qualified defensive coordinators, bad defensive coordinators. If you don't execute on the field for whatever reason it is, whether it be communication, whether it be because your players just don't fit the scheme or your players aren't executing the scheme right, you're just not going to get high commitment from the players on the field because human nature tells us, why would I work hard if I ain't working? Like, you know what I mean? Like that just is kind of how that is.
But no, I completely agree. It's like Justin on the basketball court. He's running around real fast.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any shots.
No shots. Can't make a shot. A very aggressive defender.
Yeah.
You're not just gonna walk it up the court on me.
But you feel like you affected somebody, right?
I'm picking you up. I'm picking you up at the other free throw line, and you're still probably.
I'm like that too.
Yeah.
I'll get in front of somebody, and then when I run in front of somebody who can actually play basketball or is actually a good athlete, then I'm like, oh nah, I really ain't doing nothing.
Can I get
I'm just gonna stand on the other side and try to get an easy two.
Yeah.
Like it just.
I need that. I need somebody to bring the double team. I need somebody to come over the top for me.
You mentioned Jessie Bates. That's a name we've heard thrown around. And then you said something like about Jordan Poyer. Do you think Jessie Bates fits what we're going to want to do defensively, or is there somebody in mind? I don't know. I guess I'm just kind of springing this on you that you think fits better.
I'm not a big fan of Jessie Bates. From what I've seen of him in Cincinnati, I think he relies a lot. If you look at his stats and his interception numbers, they're pretty impressive. But if you look at how he gets it, he relies a lot on eye tracking, right? And that's a good and bad thing. A lot of guys rely on eye tracking, but I think he's a little overly reliant. If you look at the games where people have had success, right, and you don't have to look far to see teams that have had success against the Bengals, it's the Cleveland Browns. Where have those teams been able to have success is if you just look this way, no matter like how long, Jessie Bates will go that way, right? Like that was, I saw it with Jacoby Brissett. I saw it with Baker Mayfield. These are not like, it's not like Aaron Rodgers, like, oh, I'm looking them off for Pat Mahomes, no look level stuff. He's very easy to manipulate with your eyes. And I worry about him in this kind of a defense because he's going to have even more space to operate in a Jim Schwartz defense. And the more space I think you give Jessie Bates, the more people will realize that he's not what the numbers might suggest, right? Where the numbers suggest that he is this Earl Thomas, like, take it away guy, where in my opinion, I think he's Earl Thomas, not like, but liked, where he does do Earl Thomas stuff, but he's not Earl Thomas. Or it's like, yeah, you try to do Troy stuff, but you're not Troy. The Troy stuff works because Troy has some of the greatest instincts in the world. If you're not that level of player, I worry about that when I see you kind of rely on those things. And that's what I see a heavy reliance in with Jessie Bates, is a lot of reliance on what the quarterback's eyes are doing instead of just being where he's supposed to in the play. And again, I think this year, for what you need at free safety, you don't need that playmaker. You just need somebody who's going to be where they're supposed to be and kind of just be the cap on the top of the bottle, right? Like, I don't need you to make the plays. I just need you to stop the leaking when it happens.
Yeah, I've seen enough blown coverages to last me a lifetime after last year. So that's the last thing we need to see.
Jessie Bates is not the guy. I would say also Jessie Bates is not the guy who you're going to get less blown coverages with. If you look at Cincinnati's defense before they decided, and remember, Cincinnati is moving on from him for a reason. And you look at Cincinnati's defense, I think the first year of Lou Anarumo, they actually gave up the highest amount of plus 20-yard passes in the NFL. And it was mainly because of Jessie Bates. Because, again, he'll make a play, he will give up some plays. And that's why I think they went with somebody like Dax Hill in the draft, because they don't feel like paying Jessie Bates the money because they think that he creates as many problems as he solves. That's my worry with Jessie Bates. I would much rather get somebody boring for free safety. Like Jordan Poyer sounds great to me. You know what I mean? Like somebody who is going to be a boring acquisition. We're not going to talk about him a lot, but the less I talk about a free safety in this defense, the better, because unless they're Ed Reed, it usually you just don't want to be talking about them, right? How many free safeties have we talked about in the last 3 years? Almost every single one of them, not for great reasons, right?
That's true.
Andrew Sadejo, John Johnson. It's never a good conversation, really, when you're talking about a free safety, unless they're one of the greats of all time. And Jessie Bates ain't that. And he plays a style to where you're going to talk about him a lot. And I think we're just going to get more of the same there with Jessie. So I wouldn't be a favor of it. I wouldn't be surprised if they signed him, though. He does fit everything that they look for.
Okay, so there is some rumblings about a potential new stadium, but maybe not in downtown Cleveland, Ohio. But, I read an article and it basically said, it was quickly built, inefficient. What are your thoughts, man? Are you excited about the potential for maybe a dome, or, talk to me about it?
I think it would make our lives easier if we played indoors. I understand aesthetically it doesn't feel right to some people, but I would just say, have you been in some of these new domes? Like the old domes, I get why people didn't want the old domes, right? The RCA dome, even up to like the Ford Field in Detroit. I don't know if you guys ever been there. It's not like a great environment, right? Like it feels pretty sterile. And that's what my opinion of domes were. And then I went to Mercedes-Benz Dome in Atlanta, Georgia. And I was like, this is the way to do it. It feels great. It always feels great in there. It's very, very comfortable. It almost ruins all other venues for you. So if you could build something like that, I'm all for it. Indoor or outdoor, there's ways like, I've heard great things about Minnesota Stadium and how they kind of replicate that look there. Even things about Indianapolis's dome. There are ways to do it right. And my thing with whatever new stadium they build, I would prefer it be indoors because, I've been in that stadium when it's in the late part of the season when the team's not good, and that's just pain for no reason, right? Like, why are we putting people through pain for no reason? Where it's like people don't understand. The higher you get up in that stadium, the harsher the winds are, and the wind. Like, people don't understand this. They're not from the Midwest. The wind is what's cold. It's not the temperature. 32 is not that cold.
Right.
But when it's windy in 32 and you're up there and it's 32, it's a horrible experience. And why, if somebody is spending season tickets, why should they be miserable for 4 games out the year when that doesn't have to be an option? Either way, whatever they do, it can't be a half-ass stadium, right? Like, if you're going to do a stadium, give it the full build time. Now it's going to be weird. Like, I don't know where you would build the stadium if it's not going to be in the city of Cleveland. Like, I don't know where that would, like, are we going to play in Canton? That would feel off. That would feel wrong. But like, I honestly, at this point, I want the luck to change. So like, if we got to move the location of where the stadium is, dude, like, this location ain't been working.
No, it's all bad juju, man. It's all bad.
I've been a huge.
Well, it is
good.
Go ahead. I was
gonna say, I've just been a huge pro dome guy the last couple of years, and everybody's always in our comments saying, why would you take away that home field advantage for the Browns? And my pushback always is, what home field advantage? We've won 1 playoff game in my life. So how much of an advantage is the cold weather?
Here's the thing too. The way the league's going, if you're a northern team that plays in the conditions within a passing league, you're not giving yourself the advantage to win. And if you want proof of that, how many times has Aaron Rodgers been to the Super Bowl despite being one of the most prolific passers of his generation?
Yep.
And it's mainly because he's so good, they get home field advantage throughout the playoffs, and it burns them. Like, it literally burns them at the end of the day, right? You don't want to be in a situation where you're like, damn, we got home field advantage. Now we can't throw the ball as much. Like, that's not what we want. I want to be able to have the home field advantage, the crowd noise, the crazy environment, the dog pound, everything in there, but not have to worry about if the conditions we're going to play in are going to affect it. And look, I understand people are like, well, we need to build a football team that can win in those conditions. Well, Derrick Henry ain't been to an AFC championship game yet. You know what I mean? So like, that's as much as you could build a team around running the football. That's as far as you can go in today's NFL. You have to be able to throw, and in a passing league, you're going to have to be able to pass in the late parts of the season in order to get to the Super Bowl. And the team that plays in the most south part of the AFC and did not have home field is the one that went to the Super Bowl in the AFC in like the last 10 years, right? Like, that's not a mistake there, right? And even them, they are a pass heavy team. So it's really about setting yourself up for success versus like, do we want to keep the cool nostalgic vibes of it's outdoors and it snows and we play in that cold weather. We gonna forget about that 5 years after they built the dome. We ain't gonna care about that now 1 second, because you know what's dope about a dome? Being in the dome.
That's
and
right.
The second somebody sits in the dome, is like, oh, this is so much better than being outside. It just is, especially these new domes.
It's a good point, because you think about that Buffalo game, the snow game. You know, they didn't move it to another outdoor, cold weather neutral site to keep the elements. They moved it to a dome.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I bet the Buffalo Bills would have wished that the game they played against Cincinnati in the playoffs was played in a dome.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, this is like, you don't want things that aren't football to affect why you don't win football games.
100%.
And every time I see about a tragic Cleveland Browns game, it's because of something to do with the weather. Why did he fumble the ball? It was cold. That ball was hard. Why did John Elway was able to go 99? The defense was cold because they was sitting on the bench for a while. It was -30 that day. Why did he check into this? He was cold. Why do we allow the cold to be an opponent? We have a hard enough playing the Browns every Sunday. We don't need to play the Browns, our opponent, and the weather. Like, I feel like 2-on-1 is enough, but that's just I know a lot of people are attached to the ideal of, playing outdoors because that's all they've ever seen Cleveland Browns football in. And that's what makes it feel like Cleveland Browns football to them. And I understand that, but I also understand that, look, 2 years after you get that dome built and you get used to them, if they go 12-4 in that dome, dog, you ain't gonna be talking about it. Don't feel like football. You know what I mean? Yep. Like, it's just gonna become the new vibe. So, like, again, like, we cling on to this because we just don't have much to cling on to, because this team has literally stunk, like been one of the worst franchises since 2013. Like, it's not even debatable. But, you know, the hope is you built the dome, you have success, and then we can, you know, have more success, because right now a lot of us aren't even talking about memories we have in this stadium that we want to replace. We talk about memories that we had in the stadium that's been replaced for 20 plus years. Yep. That's why that people want to hold on to this. So if the Browns get to an AFC Championship game in the Dome, dog, we will forget about all of our trepidations about the Dome the second we get an AFC Championship game. You know what I mean? Yes. Like, I don't think we will care as much as we care right now when it's hypothetical. Then when we're just like, well, they play in a dome, you know? And sometimes I think teams just need to say, you'll be all right. You'll be mad for like 2 days, but you'll be all right. You'll sit in the dome, be like, oh, look at the big scoreboard. Look how I can see it. You want to see fantasy football scores in the stadium like Browns fans? Because you don't see it in half the stadium at Cleveland Browns Stadium. Get a dome. They put screens all over the place. You ain't got to worry about weather damage and nothing like that. It's great. We don't have to worry about kickers or nothing like that, or being the hardest place to kick. That's not worked out for us. You know what I mean? Just build a dome, throw the football, kick the football. And if we stink, at least we know it's because we stink. You know, it's just one less variable.
That's very fair.
This episode is brought to you by Omaha Steaks. Spring is in the air, and that can only mean one thing: spring grilling. The steak experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to spring into something delicious with their semi-annual sale. With 50% off site-wide, grab all your favorites like perfectly aged, tender steaks, ocean fresh seafood, juicy burgers, incredible air-chilled chicken, and decadent desserts. Plus, when you go to omahasteaks.com and use promo code DAWGS, DAWGS at checkout, you'll get an extra $30 off your order. It's the perfect way to get fired up and spring into something special. Don't wait. Go to omahasteaks.com, use code DAWGS at checkout. Take advantage of this deal right now. Omaha Steaks is ready to ship your order right away, and you're going to want to hurry, because 50% off site-wide is only happening for a limited time. So don't miss your chance to save big right now. Visit omahasteaks.com, use code DAWGS, DAWGS at checkout. Get that additional $30 off when you shop their semi-annual sale today. Minimum order may be required. This episode is brought to you by DraftKings Sportsbook. The action never ends at DraftKings Sportsbook, especially this summer. With tons of ways to bet on all your favorite sports, you can fuel your fandom and feel the heat of the season like never before. Plus, right now, DraftKings Sportsbook is giving new customers a risk-free bet up to $1,000. That's right. Make your first bet up to $1,000, and if it doesn't win, you'll get another shot to cash in. You can throw down on all the major action for baseball, golf, MMA, and more. Plus, with same-game parlays, spreads, money lines, over-unders, and props, your betting options feel endless. Best of all, DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. You can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app right now. Use promo code TPPN. Make your first deposit and get a risk-free bet up to $1,000. That's promo code TPPN only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details.
So speaking of AFC Championship games, I think if we ever want to make one, we needed to make a change on the defensive side of the ball. Browns did so this year, brought in Jim Schwartz. What did you think of the hire, and can you tell the people what they can expect to see out of a Jim Schwartz defense?
Competence. That's what they hired, is competence. A competent professional defensive coordinator. He has been a defensive coordinator for 20 plus years. He comes from the Jeff Fisher system. He is competent at the end of the day. Now, is his defense going to blow your mind? Is it going to be like new world-changing stuff like the 49ers do? No. But guess what? When you have Myles Garrett, you don't got to get that creative. That's why you have Myles Garrett, right? Like, you don't draft Myles Garrett because you want to get creative with how you use him and all. You draft Myles Garrett because they got to get creative on how to stop him, which allows you to become very simple on the other side of the ball. The Browns' issue on the defensive side of the ball has been, for whatever reason, it hasn't been competent. The talent's been there. The management of it has not been competent. Either guys don't know the plays, either the calls are too complicated, whatever it is, that all other 30 teams are in the NFL are able to get through it with defense. We just ain't, so That's been the issue for this defense, is they haven't been competently ran. That's what Jim Schwartz brings. He's competent. He knows what works. He knows what he needs. He is very experienced. He's not going to have a lot of questions on game day, right? Joe Woods, that was his first run as a defensive coordinator. I hope, well, he's going to get another run, and technically another run in New Orleans, so good for him. But he just wasn't the man for this job. He wasn't experienced enough for this job, and that showed on game day. What Jim Schwartz is bringing is competence. Now, would that be the best defense in the NFL? I don't know, but with this talented group, I wouldn't be surprised if it's in the top 10 in the NFL, because I just don't feel like it's hard to have a good defense when you have JOK, when you have Myles Garrett, when you have Denzel Ward, when you have Greg Newsome, when you have talented players. It should not be this hard to put together a good defense. But for whatever reason, we've made our life hard. And the best example I can give you on why I think this defense is going to be much better, there's times where this Browns defense is running like normal, and we watch it, and we're like, this is the thing with the Browns defense over the last 3 years is there's either portions where you see them play and you go, this might be the best defense in the NFL. Those first three, the game against the Panthers is a perfect example.
Yep.
Those first 3 quarters, that looked like the best defense in football, and we were convinced. And then the fourth quarter happened, and we realized we had issues, right? But that's what it was. It was hey, when they're not making mistakes, when they're not in their own head, when they're not making mental errors, this is a talented group. It's the most talented group in the NFL, and it looks like it. And then the stupid stuff happens, and the guys stop believing in it, and then we get the Buffalo game. So that's partly what's kept Joe Woods his job for 3 years, is because this defense has the chance to show you how good they can be. But I think that's partly the problem, is that we know this defense is good because we see it. It's just there's something stopping it from being good consistently, and I felt like it was incompetence on the defensive side and just inexperience. That's what Jim Schwartz is bringing you, is experience, is competence. He's going to play regular old defense, right? I hope we ain't talking about zone versus prevent. I think a lot of that was overblown because a lot of it was just people assuming that certain things are going on because of the result. The truth of the matter was that people just didn't know where they were supposed to be consistently enough to play consistent defense in the NFL. And when that's the case, and I think he said it in his press conference interview, you're not going to see this on game day, right? Guys not knowing where they're supposed to be. If that was eliminated the last 3 years, the Browns might have went to an AFC championship game once or twice. If we just didn't have this every Sunday, because I can count 10 wins over the last 2 years that would have been wins instead of losses because of this. We just didn't know, oh, you were supposed to be there. I thought I was supposed to be here. How is Denzel Ward a Pro Bowler, a multiple-time Pro Bowler, a first-team NFL player, and John Johnson a Pro Bowler? How are they not able to run cover 2? These are this is that's 2 PhD students not being able to do basic algebra. And at some point you have to ask, is the calculator broken? Something's clearly gone wrong, because these two are capable of it. And that's where I was there's got to be a breakdown with communication that starts with coaching, because John Johnson and Denzel Ward should not be arguing each other about where they should be on the field, because these are 2 players. We know they're good. We know they're both good. We've seen them both be good. So the fact that they could not be good in concert, this isn't a Baker Odell thing where it's the chemistry wasn't there. There's no chemistry really with that. That's just running a play. They can't run a play functionally. No defense is going to be good no matter the talent there. And I just think with Jim Schwartz there, you're going to be able to run plays functionally. And this defense is going to be so much better just because they will be functional.
I think I had a football coach growing up who always said, if you're thinking, you're stinking. So I just felt like in Joe Wood's defense, they just too much second guessing themselves. I think Jim Schwartz is going to simplify it so much where they're going to be reacting based on instinct, a lot less thinking, and it's going to allow them to play fast and aggressive. So he was the guy I wanted them to hire. So I was excited to see it.
And it's this, it might not be that he was asking them to do too much. It's how he's communicating it to them. We all had people that aren't the greatest communicators in the world because they think of too much at one time. And they're hey, John, I need you to cover the flat, but also like, you know, do this and that. And it's like, too much at one time. And it's hard to figure out what's the order of operations there, right? And that's partly because Joe Woods is inexperienced. So he might have just been giving him the rules like he would give a DB coach. And the DB coach would give the rules like that, knowing I have time to fix this up. But as a defensive coordinator, he doesn't have time to work with that position group and make sure that those things are fixed. So it might have been like just barely poorly given out, and then the rules are different between different players, and it just wasn't thought out as this big piece of a defense. So then when it gets played, there's a lot of questions. Jim Schwartz has been running this defense for a while. I'm gonna use a video game analogy. Jim Schwartz's defense is a game that's been patched for like 3 years. Like all the bugs are gone. The game has been, you're not going to go in there and things are going to start glitching out. It's been bug tested thoroughly. He's been doing this for a while. Joe Woods, we had that day one patch and it was like Cyberpunk when it first released. It was like, man, I don't know. Like, it keep crashing. Like, I don't know what's happening. That's the best way I could put it, is that we were running the beta when it comes with Joe Woods' defense. I think Jim Schwartz is going to be a much more established, like, hey, this is how this is done, and this is done for this reason. So the lines of communication are just going to be much clearer, and guys are going to understand what they're going to do. I don't even think it's going to be more simple. I don't think that was the issue. I think it's just going to be communicated better, and the complex parts of this defense are going to be understood better because it comes from somebody who has taught those year in and year out and year in and year out at a high level. So
it's a good point.
That matters a lot.
Yep. So the Browns this week made another coaching change, letting Mike Prefert go. The special teams were, I feel like everybody knew they were a problem, but they were more focused on the defense. The special teams were not great the last couple of years. Were you surprised that the Prefert firing came when it did? And then what do you think of the Ventrone hiring?
Oh, the Bubba Ventrone hire is a home run. You look at his history, at least on Pro Football Focus. Every year he's been there. They've been plus 12 in the NFL, plus 5 for 3 years there. So he's a very good special teams coordinator. And I say this a lot because I hear this from guys in the NFL when they talk about it. Special teams coordination is less about like the X's and O's and a lot about the Jimmies and Joes when it comes to this, where it's like, how can you work your relationships with people, right? Because you're talking about guys who were the best player at a very good SEC school and then being like, hey, Greedy Williams, how about you want to try Gunner? And you had to convince somebody who was a second round pick, like, if there's like, when you play football, you know that there's certain things that if you're good enough to play this position, you're not going to be asked to do special teams, right? Special teams is for the people that are trying to find themselves, unless you have like a coach who's like real hell bent on the starters playing special teams. It's usually how that goes. So you go your whole football career thinking, I'm good at outside corner. I don't gotta do those special team stuff. That's for the young guys. And then you get to the pros, and now you one of them guys that they're gonna throw into the fodder as special teams. Somebody has to be able to convince you to do that and convince you to do that well. It's not like complex stuff that they're being taught, but it's still a new position. And Bubba Ventrone, if he's that good at special teams coordinator, it tells me he's a good communicator. And communication is also one of the things I felt like was an issue with this head coaching staff, where we weren't communicating roles effectively to players or in ways that players were receptive to, because every year, even though I think Kevin's a good coach, Kevin should stay, and he's technically brilliant, I think he has some issues where it comes to how he communicates these ideals with players, because every year we hear about players having an issue with their role and how they were talked to and all this. And it's partly because they're not good at that, right? They didn't have that diversity of minds in there. Now they have an experienced coach in Jim Schwartz in there who's been doing this a while. Former head coach, guy's been in the league forever, knows how to talk to players, is not perceived as an asshole. And then you have Ray Ventrone, who's a former player, I caught myself because I said recently, and this was like his last season was 2014, which feels recent to me.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy.
But like, so 2014, he was in the league recently, well, in this era. So he knows how things go. He's also in a prominent position in leadership. So he's able to talk to different guys that maybe Jim Schwartz is not able to, right? I think that's been part of the issue, is that when guys have issues, it always comes out. because there's nobody for them in top leadership to talk to them to satisfy their issue. Now there's a better chance of that getting caught. And when that stuff gets caught, your team's going to get better because they're going to be able to work together better and understand which roles they're going to get. So I think the offseason hires were pretty much best case scenario. I don't think they could have done much better than what they did. And I think that's a positive sign, right? One of the things I wanted Kevin to do in the offseason was get rid of some assistants, wipe out some of the assistant coaching staff, and get experience and former players on staff. And that's what they've done. So I can't sit here and turn around and be critical of it when that's exactly what I wanted it to do. So I feel good about it. Now, will it be successful? There's been a lot of times I felt really good about something.
Me too, man.
It just didn't work.
My whole life. Whole life.
Yeah, like sometimes we just be unlucky. Like it don't even be that we did anything wrong. It's just we weren't lucky that year. So that could always play out. But I think that they're doing the best to maximize their odds is what I'll put it as.
I think that's a very good point too with like the communication styles, because I think I've said it on our show before. Stefanski kind of reminds me of an engineer. He works at a factory and he's a manager because he's smart and processes, but then he'll go up to his employee and just like be extremely blunt and make the kid cry and go to the bathroom and cry. He just didn't know how to communicate with the way you want to say it to people. And I just think that was a really good point.
Well, Bill used to have this issue, right? Sean Payton used to have this issue, right? Where Bill just didn't know how to communicate with people. And if you look at Bill's first 6 seasons in the NFL, he had one winning season, I believe, in those first 6. It took him that's crazy to think about. Bill Belichick of all people. But it's because Bill was largely part of the reason he got ran out of Cleveland, wasn't allowed back into Baltimore when they changed franchises, was because like Bill, and this is known at that time, was an asshole. Like he was a much less, like he's not like Mr. Cuddly Bill Belichick now or anything like that, but he's learned to soften up and to be able to communicate guys and talk to guys better with that. But they just weren't able to communicate. They had a lot of brilliant people in that coaching staff in 94, 95, right? Nick Saban and Bill Belichick, but they were both at stages of their careers where they knew they were brilliant. They knew what they were talking about, but they didn't understand the people element of this. Is like, hey, people ain't just going to believe you know what you talk about just because you right? You need to be able to make them feel good about you being right. And that is a difficult thing for a lot of people to learn. And I think Kevin's going to have to learn, like, hey, is Kevin right about a lot of stuff he draws up on offense? I would pretty much say, yeah. Like the numbers would suggest it. He's made every quarterback that he's touched for a full season better. Like you can look at it. Baker had his best year. Kirk had his best year. And Jacoby had his best year under him. That's not a coincidence. He's very good at that. But again, just because you're right, don't mean people will believe you. And sometimes people could go about being right in a really aggressive manner because they know they're right? And that can put off people. So I think he's learning, okay, being right is not as important as being able to communicate effectively and being able to have people that can help me communicate this effectively. You have all the right answers, but at the end of the day, Kevin ain't answering the questions on the test. 53 players are. So he has to figure out a way to get that to those guys, and that's the thing.
So I think defensively, we know we need to revamp defensive line, maybe linebacker. I guess it depends on how you feel about guys like JOK and if Taki's going to come back. Offensively, I've heard receiver, that kind of thing. Is there any free agent targets, or I've even heard, possible guys like we could maybe trade for in terms of, I've heard DeForest Buckner's name thrown around. I don't know if that's a realistic possibility. Is there anybody you got your eye on?
I talked that DeForest Buckner thing out of thin air. But yeah, DeForest Buckner's one where I'm like, hey, that makes sense because I don't know where Indy thinks they're going right now. Some teams think they're going in a positive direction when they're not. I don't know where Indy thinks they're going, right? I think they're in a point where they need to go full rebuild, and DeForest Buckner would be sitting there. Wouldn't make sense for them to have at 29 at the cap hit that he is. So I think it would make sense to go after him. And I don't think the Browns are thinking of every defensive tackle as just a defensive tackle. I think they're thinking of them as a complementary piece to Myles Garrett, right? Because they're losing their last complementary piece in Jadeveon Clowney for obvious reasons. So if you're not going to have Jadeveon Clowney, who do you replace him with? We're going to instinctively think edge because Jadeveon played edge. But maybe they want to go in a different direction where DeForest Buckner is the complement to Myles Garrett. or the guy that's going to get some attention off of him. You don't really need somebody on the opposite side to take quote unquote attention. I love how it's phrased, like take attention off Myles Garrett. Unless you could clone Myles Garrett and put Myles Garrett on the other side of Myles Garrett, nobody's taking attention away from Myles Garrett. It can be TJ Watt on the other side. Guess where protections are sliding? Towards 95, because like that's who people believe is the most dominant defensive end in football. So you're not necessarily going to take attention away from him, but what you can have is somebody who can break the game if they're given more opportunities in in one-on-one situations, and that's what DeForest Buckner can bring you, right? Jadeveon was not that. Jadeveon was somebody who could help you in a run game and create some pressures, but he wasn't going to break the game there for you. DeForest Buckner has shown to be that, right? He worked great opposite of Nick Bosa in that 2019 San Francisco 49ers defense. I think that's more or less the way that they're going to go, and I think that's what they've learned is they tried to go to traditional sense where it's like, hey, we're going to put another big edge across from Myles Garrett, and that's going to split the attention. Some dudes are so good that you're never going to split the attention. Like Baltimore is always kicking 3 over to Myles Garrett. It don't matter who's healthy. That's what they're doing. The plan for Myles is the plan for Myles. So you need to have something to where somebody else can affect the game so much to where in the middle of the game, they have to go, oh, we got to do something about this. Maybe take a guy off Myles. And then that's where you can start to break some offensive lines is when they have to do mismatch in the middle of the game. But that's what I would look for. DeForest Buckner would be fine there. Daron Payne's been thrown around. I don't think he fits the mold and what they're looking for, to be honest. He's a really good player, but I don't think DeForest Buckner makes more sense there than Daron Payne to me. They could go the veteran route where they go like a Dalvin Tomlinson and just try to fill this up with guys. I wouldn't be surprised if the edge rushers that aren't Myles Garrett get smaller, right? Arden Key is somebody I think that could be a real target for the Browns. You know, smaller, quicker guys, kind of similar to how they used Tack McKinley for like those 4 weeks that Tack was on the team where he played well, and kind of use him as an extra, 5 wide rusher. So again, they're moving to that wide 9 too. That's another Jim Schwartz staple. So you're going to have guys outside of tight ends now. Instead of inside tackle, inside guard. So that's going to change the body composition of what you're looking for on the edge. So I think lighter edges and bigger guys in the interior is where they're going to focus in on. And remember, you look at Jim Schwartz defenses, you're talking about really big power ends in 3 techs, Javon Hargraves. We're talking about Nick Fairley and Ndamukong Suh in Detroit. That's what traditionally works there. So I wouldn't be surprised if they really try hard to get somebody like a DeForest Buckner to pair with Myles, because given what they've run before in that defense, that's what would make the most sense when it comes to trying to replace the attention that Jadeveon has with somebody else. I think DeForest might be somebody they want to look at.
I would be pumped for DeForest, for sure.
So as far as like the NFL draft, assuming a roster looks pretty much how it is right now, so not factoring in like free agency and trades, who would you want to see the Browns go after?
Oh, there's a player I think I like a lot. Now he plays center. And some people don't think center's an immediate need. I say, who says center's not an immediate need, right? Because Ethan Posic's not under contract. You already have a bunch of offensive linemen under new deals. So like, what are the odds that you want to spend more money on another offensive lineman? That's only been good for like 12 games. Nick Harris, have no idea if his body can hold up as a center in the NFL. Didn't really hold up that first game. And he's already undersized. But there's a center, and I know some of you guys might be Ohio State fans. You might not like him. But Olusegun Oluwatimi, he's good. He's really good. Nobody's talking about him. But I'm pretty sure Ohio State fans are familiar because there are 2 plays that he sprung off in the middle of that game that kind of broke that game wide open from the ground game. He is really good. I don't know why nobody's talking about him. Maybe it's because he plays center. But this is a dude who was – I believe he was All-American in 2 different conferences, which tells you like he's pro ready. This man he played at 3 different schools, Air Force, Virginia, and Michigan. And he was great, all conference at every school that he played at. He kind of left Virginia, it feels like, because he was just bored, went to Michigan and dominated in the Big Ten, got his most honors in the Big Ten. This is a really good player. The fact that he changed schools so often and was able to dominate like year 1 that he changed tells me that this is an NFL ready player because he could just learn a new offense and get ready like that. He's bigger than Nick Harris. He's more NFL ready than Nick Harris. And I think you get him there, you're not worrying about center for the next 4 years because he's going to be under contract, under probably a second or third round contract, and you're going to be fine there because he's going to come in day one and be your center, and we're not going to worry about that. And you put him next to two great guards like we have right here. Oh, he'll be the run game will be fine. Deshaun Watson, at least up the middle, he'll be all right. We know he creates kind of his own problems when it comes to his edge pressure because Deshaun, he takes really big steps in these pass sets, but that's a whole nother issue for a whole nother day. But yeah, I think Olusegun Oluwatimi, he right now, of all the players I looked at, is the one where I'm like, man, I don't know why you can get him in mock drafts in the third round. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. But if that's true and he is there in the third round, I would fly in to the podium to take Oluwatimi there. I think that's an absolute steal.
As Ohio State fans who are Browns fans and also a big DPJ fan, I think I can speak for Browns/Ohio State fans if they're from Michigan and they come in and they perform, we're happy to have them. If you're Braylon Edwards, you were okay for a year, then you can, maybe not so much.
And we don't know how down he get with Michigan. You know, he was only there 1 year.
That's true.
Know what I mean? We don't know if this is a Russell Wilson situation where he still claimed the other school. Like, it could be one of those where it's like, it's a grad school. You don't claim grad school as hard as you claim your undergrad, right? Like, that's not usually how it goes. So who knows? He might still be in there going hard for Virginia and just was like, I was at Michigan for a year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We don't know how hard he takes it, you know? So maybe just assume if you're a Browns fan has an issue with that, just say, hey, he went to Virginia for real. You know what I mean? Like, only 1 year.
I was going to say, maybe nobody's talking about him because you really got to practice, I think, to say his name. Can you do it one more time?
Yeah, I was very impressed.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Olusegun Oluwatimi.
It just rolls off the tongue.
Yeah. I'm going to have to spell it out phonetically and practice saying it in the mirror.
I'll tell you what, though, if he's that great and he comes to Cleveland, we'll learn it quick.
But well, hey, man, we're going to let you get out of here. We kept you for 43 minutes. We appreciate you being here. Thanks so much for being here. If you haven't subscribed to Quincy's YouTube yet, make sure you do so. Also, you can find him on Twitter at Quincy. You got any other socials we want to plug, or is that pretty much it?
That's pretty much it.
Okay, those
if
are the big ones.
If anybody else finds me anywhere else, they can find me.
Okay, cool. Okay. Once again, thanks for being here, man. We appreciate it. I'm sure everybody's going to enjoy listening to this episode. And it was awesome meeting you kind of in person for the first time. So thanks again.
Thank you, man. You guys have a great day.
You
too, man.
Bye. All right, well, we're going to wrap this one up today. We appreciate Quincy being here with us. Hopefully you guys all enjoyed the episode. You guys have been telling us now for a couple of years we should try to get him on. We finally pulled the trigger, did it, got him on the show, and I think it turned out great. So big shout out to him. And again, if you haven't followed him yet, or you liked what you heard and you haven't heard of him before somehow, go check him out on YouTube. He's got a ton of good content, Browns related. So go check him out. Big thank you to him for being here. And we appreciate you guys all listening. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Dawgs Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and follow us on Twitter at the Dawgs Podcast. Get your thoughts on the show at thedawgspodcast.com.